planted up there, but it's all harvested together at once. So instead of wine, our usual method of blending wines where we make each wine individually and then blend it really close to bottling, we actually do that process in reverse. And we bring all that fruit together and we ferment it as one lot. So you may have, half of your bin is Touriga Nacional, and then you'll have a 10% Tinta Cow or Sazao or any of the other varietals that are planted in that vineyard. And we let them co-ferment and we let it go down about halfway. So we look for the Brix, which is the measure of, it's a measure of sugar level in wine. And we let that go down to about 12 Brix. We usually pick between 24 and 26, and then we press it off. And from there, we babysit that wine. So, and usually that ends up being me, where I am in there every 4-ish hours or so, checking those sugar levels, because we want to hit it just right. And what we're looking for is usually a drop down to about 9% or 9 Brix, so that we've extracted a decent amount of alcohol, we've converted a decent amount of alcohol into the wine, but we still want to maintain that nice level of residual sugar. From there, when we deem the time is right, we add high proof, which usually is about 190 proof, so about 95% alcohol. Be great to use for washing your hands right now, but we like to save it and put it in the wine. The interesting thing about the product that we use to fortify our wine is that it's actually recycled wine that we take from our lab samples, and any wine that we don't use, instead of throwing it down the drain, we collect it in kegs. And then we send those off to a distillery and they distill that down for us to make this high proof alcohol. So we're recycling our own product back into our Forte, which is something really cool and not something that, at least in my experience, a lot of wineries do. So that's one of our main things that makes our Forte really different than other port style wines. We then put the wine into barrel. And that's one of the other things that we've noticed that really changes our port style wine versus what you see a lot in the North American market, is that it's aged for a really long time. You heard some of those barrel age timelines that Scott was talking about: 60 months, 59 months, 33 months. Our regular wine sits about 18 to 24 months in barrel, and we let our Forte sit for almost 5 years, usually. I believe the 11 was close to 7 years in barrel. And what that does, in my perception, is that it really allows those flavors to meld together. I don't know if any of you have had younger fortified wine and you kind of get 2 layers of flavor. You get that nice sweetness and fruit, and then all of a sudden you're punched in the face with the alcohol. By aging our wine for so long, we allow it to really meld together, so you're getting that all as one experience. You get that nice heat from the alcohol, but it's not overpowering and it's not separate from the rest of the wine. It's all coming to you as one experience. And so we keep an eye on it for 5 years. It also lets some of those more caramel flavors develop, which is always really nice. It's interesting to see how that changes vintage to vintage. You'll have some vintages that stay really bright and really fruit forward all the way through their aging process. And then you'll have some that start to show a little bit more of that micro-oxygenation from the barrel, where they start to get more of that caramel and butterscotch and some of those more candied flavors, and which is fun to taste through a flight of port. It's one of the reasons why we recommend tasting some of our older vintages of port, is because you can taste all these different flavor profiles that are coming through, not only vintage to vintage, but depending on how long it's aged, both in the barrel and in the bottle. makes for a really interesting experience. And then, like Scott said, with the bottling, it is one bottle at a time. And if you've ever been around when we're bottling our Forte, you'll see we have long tables that stretch down one side of our barrel room and turn and come back down the other. And that's all to get wine into that skinny necked bottle that will not go through any bottling line at all.
Yeah, and a couple of things. When you're making port, we press off the wine from the fermenting skins and seeds and so forth, and then fortify it after it's pressed away from the skins. Because if you add all that alcohol in on top of all those skins, the alcohol works as a solvent, and it'll just pull a tremendous amount of tannin and stuff. A lot of port makers or fortified winemakers in California will fortify on the skins because they want all that inky color and stuff that comes out, but it really doesn't make a very balanced wine. But when you do it, it's really kind of interesting because you're adding all this alcohol, and you got a million yeast in there, and you're just pissing them all off at once because you're killing them all at the same time. And they're, of course, breaking sugar into carbon dioxide and alcohol. So they release all that CO2 at one time. So it's kind of neat. You know, when Jana and I were first dating, and I was kind of trying to impress her as a winemaker, and this was at Folie à Deux, and I go, it's time to fortify the port. And I said, climb up this ladder and stick your head in the tank and watch, Well, I pumped in that alcohol, and it almost knocked her off the tank. Of course, I was down below, ready for her if she did fall off. But it's just an explosive thing. It's really, really kind of neat. And like Molly said, right after you fortify the wine, and it's very disjointed. It's just all, you still have all that grape juice fruit and all that alcohol. And as the wine ages, it marries, and it seems to dry out, because what's happening is that sweetness is mixing with that alcohol. And so you're not tasting that heat, and you're not tasting that over sweetness. You end up with this married product that is married at the point where we put it in the bottle.
Brian, were you there when we fortified the port this year?
Yes, I was, and hello to everybody. As I listened to Scott just discuss that, and my first thought when Molly said this was, from a culinary standpoint, everybody out there can relate to this analogy. There's a big issue with spaghetti sauce. Make a spaghetti sauce, there is a divided court, first day spaghetti sauce, and then the sauce you taste after you put it away in the refrigerator and you bring it back out and you taste it. I've always been a second, third day spaghetti sauce guy because the integration of all those fabulous flavors all become one. And it's an interesting thing. It's a perfect analogy to that. And so as you look at a tomato-based sauce, we're all used to spaghetti sauce being pretty much real-time ad hoc. I was always the guy that preferred second-day spaghetti sauce. So yeah, I totally get the concept, and I think that's
So this is a good time to segue into your section, Brian.
cool. Well, wow, there's so many things to talk about when it comes to a food standpoint. I'm gonna say a couple quick things about port as a professional chef and having a pretty high-profile restaurant up in Lake Tahoe. Port, as I told Jana just recently in a meeting, was one of my secret tools. So when it came to using port in a restaurant, we would use it as a fortifier to deglaze sauces. We would make port syrups. We would add sugars, more sugar than it's already there. And we would bring it to a real syrupy state, use it in squirt bottles, and go over the top of desserts. Incredibly diverse product. But honestly, one of my biggest issues was how port seemed to disappear in the restaurant from my sous chefs and prep cooks. So that was that means it must be good because they're all enjoying it. Molly's going to talk a bit about sweet side of port, because you think of port, most everybody, I think, immediately from a European standpoint or a worldwide standpoint, think, oh, I've heard of Stilton cheese. Cheese comes sort of as a digestive at the end of the meal. But when I was in Portugal recently, training just north of Lisbon, between Porto and Lisbon, I as well, Jan and Scott as well, were served as an aperitif, as a beginning to a meal. And so, aperitifs are meant to kind of get your palate going and kind of creates that doorway to the next thing that you're going to taste. The obvious thing is what we like to talk about a lot is pairings that have similar profiles. So think about port, there's residual sugar, alcohol, there's just a cornucopia of fruit flavors there. All those fruit flavors that are in Scott's port, for that matter, any port, are all distinctly different, but they all lend themselves a lot to sweets. So we call that the common pairing, the bridge, where putting two things together that have similar flavor profiles, bring them together, they elevate together. Then there's the other school that we talk about, in which we have opposing flavor profiles. Opposing flavor profiles are way different. A lot of times you're going to put things together that have contrast. What happens in contrast is what you elevate is the flavor profile, not only in the wine, but the flavor profile in the food. So with really contrasting profiles, and a good example would be Stilton cheese and pork. These things couldn't be the most opposite. Big butter fat, veiny, blue characteristics against this unbelievable pork. So Molly's going to start out and kind of bounce off some desserts, because I am blessed as a winery chef to have a assistant winemaker. I call her the winemaker. Scott's right. Scott just fills out the Molly does it. She happens to have a great skill in the kitchen with sweets. So she's brought a bunch of great things to me over the years. And so I'm going to let her kind of bounce a little bit through her sweet palette, because I am admittedly savory. So Molly, give us a couple highlights of your sweet pairings.
Yeah. So besides winemaking, which takes up most of my time, one of my biggest hobbies is to bake. I love baking, and I love pretty much all kinds of sweets. I rarely eat them. I just make them and force them upon everybody else because I don't want to have them in my house.
Which we love at the winery.
Scott, you missed out on the chocolate. Oh no, you did have one of the chocolate cupcakes.
Yeah, I did.
I'll bring some more of those in one day soon. But our first recommendation comes from our Shenandoah Valley tasting room manager, Dom, who makes port brownies. And what he does, his trick is just to buy a box mix of brownies. I'm partial to the Ghirardelli brownie mix that you can get at most grocery stores, or you at least used to be able to get at most grocery stores, or the big boxes at Costco where you get about 6 of them at once. And his recommendation is that you just substitute the water in those recipes for port. And then it brings out that rich, syrupy flavor. It brings some of that fruit note into the brownies themselves. And I have had them before. They are delicious. And if you're using our Forte to actually cook in a dessert like this, of course it's going to pair really well with the Forte itself. Next on my list I have is Black Forest cake, going on like Chef Brian was talking about, those really complementary flavors in our Forte, and we usually get a nice cocoa note and bright red cherry. So those, my first thought is those two go really well together. Create a Black Forest cake, Black Forest cupcakes, anything like that. It's gonna be phenomenal. To bring a different side of that profile in, tiramisu is always a phenomenal dessert. That again, that kind of the coffee cocoa note in there really plays nicely with the forte, and also that nice pastry cream that you use, or custard depending on your recipe, can all be really nice and super complementary with the forte. I know Brian's got something that he wants to share next.
Yeah, anybody else can post stuff online too, what they like to
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, on that note, you know, there's a chat box down there. If you want to just come straight to me with a question and want to be private about it, feel free. Just go to the chat box, cursor down to me, just send me a note, and I'll be happy to answer your question. So figs for me are the savory element of the, again, I'm a savory palate guy. They're the ultimate thing for me. I'm a big guy. Jan is going to bring up some figs, man. And so with figs, because on their own, they tend not to have that much of a sweet component. Figs need a little help. So one of the things that that I have done back in the restaurant, as well as on occasion during fig season, is to brulee them. So when you get a chance to buy figs, I highly recommend this. Just buy them. Doesn't matter, missions, blacks, they're all good. Cut them in half. Take sugar on top, and a lot of it, which is the key. So everybody that's had a great creme brulee knows that the crunch into the creme brulee is one of the most natural. But for that crunch, the creme brulee would just be another pudding custard. So you take a fig, and you put the sugar on there, and you either put it under the broiler, super hot, very close, and you literally caramelize the sugars to what we call hard crack stage. Hard crack stage, for anybody that does sugar work, that's where it literally gets to the point where to cook it enough, it cracks. That is the brulee. But those with a torch, I recommend taking the torch and doing it with a handheld torch, like you would do creme brulee. And creme brulee crunch is great, but a crunchy fig with a brulee top notch. Then with that, just really my go-to for that brulee fig is just a piece of cheese next to it, preferably a blue vein cheese or something. That's the fig element. I do love it. But then there's the other things, Molly. The obvious cheese course, the obvious cheese tray, and all the things.
Yeah, another dessert that we've actually paired in the past at one of our previous events was, I call it kind of a Frankenstein dessert, because we really looked for those complementary flavors. And so we ended up doing little ginger shortbread cookies, and that ginger spice really brings out this beautiful spice note in the forte itself, with a milk chocolate pudding and then a chocolate hazelnut cake, and kind of parfait that into a mason jar, and it turned out phenomenally well. And all those flavors put together with that forte was just spectacular. It brings out a richness in the fruit, it plays up some of that spice, and it makes for an absolutely delicious course. I am a huge fan of a traditional cheese plate as dessert, dried fruit, particularly those dried tart cherries that you can get, nuts, dark cocoa, really dark chocolate. I mean, my preference is usually at like a 75% cocoa or above. Here's a plate actually that I made for Thanksgiving this year and had some local honey. This one we did as an appetizer, so we included some different types of salamis, but you'll see I've got dried apricots, some dried cherries, Marcana almonds, which are my absolute favorite.
The best.
That saltiness that you get out of Marcana almonds with the richness of the Forte. Sorry, my mouth is starting to water a little bit. I haven't eaten dinner yet, and so I'm getting hungry as we're talking about this.
Let me jump in, Molly. Those of you who don't know the Marcona almond, it is the benchmark for almonds. And California is very proud of their almonds. I guarantee you, those that have had it know the difference. And how interesting it is that Marcona almond is coming from Portugal, hence the home of pork. So and Spain as well. So, all right, I just want to throw that almond in because I agree with you. They're the best.
I'm a big fan. And then my recommendation on a cheese course, especially if you're pairing it with the Forte, is to really get a mix of cheeses. I have on here, I had some aged Gouda that was spectacular, that really kind of heavy salt crystal kind of cheese that I just absolutely adore. And then bring in some real creamy things. You'll see I have some brie on there. And then don't be afraid to get into some of the funkier stuff. Blue cheeses, gorgonzolas. I mean, those are pretty mild in terms of how funky you can get. But definitely, as Brian mentioned before, some Stilton. Get into some of those really interesting cheeses that have some of that more pungent flavor and aromas to them, because those will surprise you with how great they go with the Forte. This is always our biggest recommendation when people ask us in the tasting room, well, what do you recommend pairing with your Forte? Is we say, go with kind of a more traditional cheese course type dessert, because our Forte is aged. It plays really beautifully with all those flavors. It's something really fun for you to try. And on that kind of pungent cheese note, one of our other recommendations is a walnut cheese bread. I'm partial to the blue cheese and walnut bread that Andres bakes and Taste serves, both local businesses up here in Amador. And just toasting that with a little bit of butter and then pairing that with some of the Forte is absolutely killer. It is spectacular for a really simple course. It's really amazing. And you get those nice pungent cheese notes, but then you get kind of that earthy tone of the nuts. And then, you can't go wrong with a nice warm slice of bread with butter on it.
That's a lot of superlatives. You're right. Right. So my thing is, as a winery chef, is I also have to produce foods that not just taste good with Scott's and Jana's wines, but I have to always utilize the wine in my cooking. So in this particular case, I want to talk about just using wine as a medium to an end result. So in this case, we're going to talk about port sauce. So like I said earlier, port wine is a great tool. And so I decided today, so you're going to have to bear with me, do some technology here. I decided to do a quick little dish today in the kitchen of port wine. So what I've got here is the makings of quite a nice bite. So the lamb is 2 Frenched out racks. Those of you who don't know what French means you cut all the fat away from the bones. This is Sleeper Ranch up in Amador, just a couple miles from the winery. And then on the left is all the trim meat that I took off of that. Of course, the port. And then what you normally do when you make a reduction sauce, whether it's port or any other thing, but you're going to use demi-glace depending upon what you're making. If it's a vegetarian dish, you would use vegetable stock. If it was poultry, you would use obviously a chicken stock. If it was duck, you would use duck stock. In this case, the one thing we don't make is lamb stock, which is interesting. So because it's a bit strong, so we really lean towards more of the beef base. And so I just showed a brown gravy mix, which is a commercial version. All of you can go out to the grocery store and get a straight up brown gravy mix. And just make it on the thin side. And that would be the base. Those three things are the basis of this dish. So I did actually produce a video, and the video is really driven by getting the caramelization of the lamb properly done, getting the pan nice and hot. So I'm going to share that with you here right now. Let's get this. This is technically challenging, but I think I can do it. So here we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm just hard sauteing these lamb rack pieces, browning them good. All the little pieces are behind. Probably don't hear the audio, but there's quite a sizzle going. And so we're going real high heat. We're trying to get the pan, pick up all the little proteins off of the lamb and the lamb trimmings. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, if anybody's interested, that I use induction cooking in my house. So I poured off the fat. So I got all the fat poured off, super high heat again. So now I'm going to do the port addition. The thing is, I only put about a quarter cup of port in there, and with this heat, it went away quick. And the idea is that you want enough liquid in there to get all the brown bits. So I'm going to add another quarter cup. It's like maybe a touch more. And now we're going to actually get proper amount of liquid in there. And we're going to get that thing really going. So with a whisk, I'm going to scrape up all the brown bits, get everything very caramelized. Now we've got these super heightened flavors. And so now I'm going to add the brown stock, demi-glace. One of the things I quickly noticed was it was too thick. So you'll notice that I'm going to go away from the video, and I'm going to add what we call a water back. Scott and Molly know what a water back is, because in winemaking, sometimes they will actually do a water back. So I added water to get it much more loose and controllable.
Brian, those are called Jesus units.
Getting all the bits off of it, and so that is essence of a reduction, port sauce reduction. Hot, fast, and furious. So what I'd like to share with you next is kind of the final product, which is interesting, because you look at final product. And so what we have here, up screen, I'm good at this. I'll share the screen. And so here we have rack of lamb, port wine reduction. I happen to be growing fava beans right now, so I couldn't resist by throwing a couple fava beans in there. And I've got some beautiful heirloom greens growing in the deck, and of course some port. And there you have it. Seemed quick and easy. And the recipes, of course, will be shared online. You can email me at Chef Brian at Scott Harvey Wines, and we'll help you through any of this stuff that you want. And the last thing I wanted to throw out there was a discovery that I had recently. I was making a Manhattan. I do like a bourbon every once in a while, and I didn't have my favorite high-end French vermouth, which is a wine as well. And so all that was in the cabinet, there was no sweet vermouth, was a little bit of Forte left in the bottle. So I thought, what the heck? Let's throw some Forte in my Manhattan. Threw it in with the bourbon, put it in the shaker, shook it, put a little of my favorite cherries in there, shook it, poured it up. Amazing. So I created a whole new Manhattan taste for it. So try that at all. On that, I think we're talking about cigars.
Yeah. And
Scott's
the
already
best,
started.
Jana, you can, I don't know if you can see this cigar. This is a Scott Harvey cigar. And Jana and I had the Dominican Republic, Arturo Fuente is a cigar maker in the Dominican. And they, through a contact, they sent, I told them what kind of cigar I like to smoke, which is actually a Davidoff Griffin cigar. And so they sent us 12 different blends. You know, tobacco's like wine. It's a product of place and it has a story to tell. And so Jana and I pulled out a whole bunch of our wines and then sat down and began to smoke all 12 of these cigars at the same time, trying to figure out which one went best with which cigar went best with our style of winemaking. Needless to say, we were pretty green after a half hour, 45 minutes of it. And, but we came up with this one. And this is this has a Connecticut wrapper. It has a Maduro tip, and then they match actually underneath the cigar band. And it's very similar to that Griffin, the main part of the cigar. But we bought like 1,500 of these cigars, and then we used them to market the port. We never sold them because I really didn't want to pay all the tobacco taxes and all the licensing and all that stuff. So when people bought the Forte, they got a cigar, and we used it as a promotional thing. And I'm down to about 10 or 15 of them left. So it really goes well. I've smoked a lot of them with a lot of Forte, and it goes well. But I think it's just a natural.
What does it take to get one of those, Scott?
A lot now, since we only have a few.
Oh, the Forte is sold in 6-packs, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
We don't have enough cigars left for that, though, unfortunately.
So any questions, Jana?
Anyone want to share what they're drinking tonight? I know I've got some 2015 Reserve Barbera. I realized, I told Scott earlier, I said, I think all of my stash of Forte is at the winery, and I don't have room for it here. So I had to break into some library Barbera, which darn, it's
I'm finishing a bottle of port that Bob and Christy, they're on the here, that we opened the other night. We did a distancing dinner, 2 ends of a 12-foot table, but had a great time. And then also our 13 Forte.
I got the 14 Syrah right here.
ooh.
Background. Delicious. Went quite well with the lamb.
Rebecca Hall, I just saw that you did it. You're not Rebecca Hall. Yeah? Huh. Well, anyway, you were just pouring some Forte. Yeah. Yeah, and Ted as well.
Nice.
Justin, you don't have anything there, I see. Oh, he's
Ooh.
drinking the Cabernet. Yeah,
So somebody out there is drinking 2011 Forte. A couple people are drinking 2011 Forte.
This is 2010, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. 2011 was great. So when I started at Scott Harvey in 2015, 5 years ago. And when I was there, we only had 11, 13, and 14 in barrel. We ended up bottling the 11 and the 13 a couple years ago. So right now I have in the cellar 14, 15,
Do a chat. We just
16, 17, 18, and 19, all in the cellar, ready. So a couple of them are ready to be bottled. They'll be bottled
Yeah, 14's
maybe
ready.
the end of this year.
Yeah,
But we
14's
have a
actually
lot.
14's actually starting to develop a little bit of a ruby character because it's been in barrels so long. And then you'll notice our vintages aren't consecutive. And the reason for that is that we use a lot of this forte in making the incinerator. And that's what Jana's 2 stories above me here in this house is drinking upstairs. But our incinerator is a blend of Zinfandel, Syrah, and then we bring it up to about 0.8, 1% residual sugar using the forte. So the vintages that we don't want to keep for long-term aging and that we don't think are worthy of being vintage dated will go into the incinerator rather than using a concentrated coloring for it.
Hey, Scott, it's Clark Smith.
Hey, Clark.
How you doing? I missed a lot of this because I had to be out making wine, but are you going to have a tape of this? Because
Yeah,
like to
yeah, I'll send it to you. But for your information, you guys, Clark has revolutionized the California wine industry more than any single living winemaker today. Probably the person that revolutionized it more was Louis Pasteur, who taught us that Mother Nature made wine through yeast and bacteria. But he developed a process where I can now pull vinegar out of my wine, and which has changed winemaking tremendously from the days when he and I were young whippersnappers in this business. And so now the only one, if I made a wine and screwed up and ended up letting Mother Nature take it down the path, past the path where the human species wants to drink it and rather where the fruit fly wants to drink it, I could only blend my vinegar content down with wine that had lower vinegar content. But today, through well, he can probably explain it to you, through a cross-flow filtration system, and you actually split the wine in half and take out the vinegar from the half that's it's in, and then blend it back together. But it's really, really changed the wine industry.
Well, I think a bigger deal is, you know, California, our air is really too dry, and we end up getting our grapes ripe when we can't make those classic European styles. And I really love the way you are able to tackle, you know, some very graceful Amador Zins that are almost like Tuscan wines. So that's, you know, but we do have the ability to pull alcohol down now and make balanced wines. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that, you know, ever since you donated that keg of 14 Zin to my wedding, you caused a lot of trouble in my marriage, Scott, because, you know, because Ruthie back here, she likes your wine better than mine. So knock it off, will you?
This is what I want to drink.
Yeah.
Look him up. Clark's wines are great. I'll trade you anytime, Clark. We can trade your wine for ours.
I'm gonna do I've got a wine called Saint Laurent that I'm gonna do a seafood, red wine and seafood cooking show in a couple of 3 weeks. So look for that on the Winesmith site.
Yeah, I got a bunch of holes in the racks behind me, so let's trade some wine and I'll fill them up.
That sounds great. Yeah, I know Ruthie will go for that.
Hey, Clark, I had a fabulous result with a sous vide halibut with Scott's Barbera. So I totally am on board with seafood and red wine.
Yeah, well, that's a good example because Barbera doesn't have very much tannin, but it does have good acidity.
Right.
The Saint Laurent is the same way. It has really soft tannins and pretty low alcohol too. So that's the kind of red wine that really goes with seafood. And I think the best wine and food book ever written is by Josh Wesson, and it's called Red Wine with Fish. It's starting off with, he's Jewish, so the first wine and food combination he ever had was Manischewitz and gefilte fish. But it's a great book.
Saint Laurent's a variety that most people in America are not familiar with. It's a variety we used a lot in Germany because it will run some pretty good dark juice, especially if you heat the must just before fermentation.
Yeah,
and
we do that too.
It's a parent variety to a lot of varieties like Zweigelt and Austrian red varieties in Austria.
It's descended from Pinot Noir, but you'd never know it.
Yeah, because it's so dark.
Well, and it has some herbal elements to it. But the reason it's called Saint Laurent is that we used to pick all the grapes in Europe legally on the Saints' days. And so most of those are in September and October. But St. Lawrence was the Bishop of Rome, and he was martyred, I think it was 286 AD, on August 10th. So you pick this stuff. It gets ripe really early, and that's why it has good acidity and low alcohol. Most grapes will be real harsh if you do that, but there's something in Saint Laurent that puts a kind of pajamas on the tannin.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh. It's nice to learn something at these things rather than be the one that's always giving out the information.
By the way, Scott, we've been using, I have a client in Kansas City that I had to teach how to do a cash still VA. And we spent all afternoon doing that. And the first thing I had him do was to look at your YouTube video to give him the idea. Thank you for that.
We'll have updated ones coming soon.
Did you put them on YouTube already, Molly?
Not yet. We're finishing the editing on them, making sure that they're up to snuff, and then they'll be up online.
Well, there's something up there.
Yeah, if
it is missing. The only thing you're missing there is you didn't say the strength of your sodium hydroxide.
What is it? Yeah, 0.1 molar.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's on the updated one.
It is. Yeah, we definitely talk about it in the updated one.
Yeah, but anyway, it was really great. It's just a little shorty, and it shows how to do it, and they really appreciated it.
Great.
Awesome.
So do we have questions from anyone else?
Well, I know, Scott, Clark. Thank you, Clark.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Christy is going to show us her app right now.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday happy hour. It was really great. I actually learned a lot. Forte is actually my latest favorite, and I just want to do a shout out for some guests over in the Bay Area. So we have Ophelia and Devaney joining us all the way from the peninsula. So it's kind of nice to reach out to them as well and have them be introduced to the Scott Harvey wines. Hopefully you've had a chance to check out the new mobile experience that Scott Harvey wines have introduced to their customer base. I was actually following along with what Chef Brian and Molly were saying, and I was kind of just like testing out. I was really intrigued, Molly, by that dessert that you mentioned.
The gingerbread, with the ginger shortbread one.
Yeah, and then what was the other, the one before? So I think even like something like a tiramisu, I was surprised.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna try, because normally I wouldn't even know what to drink with that because it's already sweet. But you're right about the cocoa powder. So I'm just gonna just type it into this mobile app, which kind of is your nice guide, your cheat sheet in terms of finding the right wine and food pairings. And what's nice about this is that it has a lot of intelligence from Scott Harvey Wine, from Chef Brian and Molly, and also from any of us using it. The more we enter information, it actually gets smarter. So let me say tiramisu, if I could get that correctly. And there you go. Thank you, Molly, for that recommendation.
Yeah, of course.
And so
That sounds great. I'm trying to download it on my iPhone, and it's
yes,
not
sir.
showing up.
Well,
Is
I'd
it
be
an
happy
iPhone app?
to. Well, it's actually a progressive web app, meaning that you don't have to actually download it from an Apple store. We want to make it available for anyone without having that dependency. So basically, you go to the URL app.parenting.com. In fact, we sent out the invitations, and if you didn't get your exclusive invite, I'm happy to follow up to make sure that you get that. And also, we are providing live tutorials, and happy, to walk you through it. But it's just kind of fun that, all the things that we learned today, if you forgot, you can actually use the app to remind you. And even the rack of lamb, let's see. Well, it was with a port reduction, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, port reductions.
I know when we first started discussing that we would do a webinar on our forte,
yes,
we all started racking our brains for what we would pair with it that's not just dessert or just drinking it by itself. And so it was a lot of kind of trial and error with some things, but also some things that we all had that we've done previously. And that's really what tasting and pairing is all about, is connecting those points in your memory of, oh, I had this thing once and it was phenomenal. And then bringing that back to the forefront of your mind. And for me, that's the essence of doing a food and wine pairing, is creating that sense memory.
And
right.
the biggest things for pairing is actually company and conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And something when we're sheltering in place isn't real possible. But when we come out of this, it'd be great to have everybody on this webinar come to the winery, and we'll just drink copious amounts of port and have a good time talking.
Yeah.
And maybe smoke up the rest of these cigars.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Christy.
Yeah, and in fact, I was just going to mention one thing. The blue vein cheeses, I think, are such a classic pairing.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So basically, I was taking notes, but also it's good to know that we can rely on the new Scott Harvey mobile app to help us with some of these pairing guidelines. And thank you for covering both savory and the sweet pairings. It was very, very enlightening.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks so much, Christy.
So
Wonderful.
do we have any more questions, Jana?
We need, if somebody wants more cigars made.
Yeah. Yeah.
I second that. I second that, Scott.
Oh, yeah.
And no, not a lot of, I don't see, maybe I'm missing something, but nope. But thank you all for being here. I do want to.
Jana, actually, maybe if you don't mind, just kind of reminding people your any special offers for some that may not be aware of it.
Can you see my special offer right now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, well, I am not a very good person to be in charge of pictures, I have to say. So
We've been fighting with it all day on her computer. She has a new computer, and it's just
I don't, Scott, I'd like to blame it on the computer, but I think it's the operator.
I
Can
think
they help her?
I think I may have it. Well, one quick second.
Oh, that's right. Molly helped me with it. So Molly, yes.
I definitely have it somewhere.
Notice Molly's young, and she tends to be our computer expert.
I've somehow become the tech the tech consultant for.
I'll just add, while you're doing that, Barb and John Brimlow up in Humboldt County, we got the email about the Forte, and we did buy some Forte because of the special.
Well, thank
Oh,
you.
Great.
well,
Yay.
thank you.
Awesome. All right.
Hey, Scott, I know I missed this before. I'm sure you said it, but what's in the last kiss?
The last kiss is when I worked for Folie à Deux, I created a wine for them called Ménage à Trois. And the last kiss is basically the Ménage à Trois blend. When we sold Ménage à Trois, I didn't stop making the wine and just put a new name on it. And it's similar to the Incinerator. It's set for it's at about 2% residual sugar instead of 1%.
Uh-huh. I see. So it's mostly Zinfandel?
Zinfandel, Syrah, and Forte.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
I think the most recent vintage has a little bit of Petite Syrah in it as well. It's one that I would have to go back and look. My mental notes on our blends, and once the wine is in bottle, I do a data dump at that point and start worrying about the next ones.
Yeah, since we've got 60 different wines in the cellar.
Yep. So I think can you all see my screen that I popped up with our deal that we're doing. So if you either online or if you call us at the winery, 209-245-3670, and if you want to place an order for either shipping or pickup at you can do that and use that same code port 30, and we'll honor that discount for you as well.
Right.
Yeah, if any of you are local and want to escape a little bit and come to pick up your wine, we've had some pretty decent success of people coming in, and they give us a call, let us know what they want. We pack it up for them and leave it outside, so it's contactless wine transfers, kind of almost a hostage scenario. And and you give us a call, let us know when you're going to be coming by, and we'll make sure we have your wine ready for you.
Well, I just tasted this stuff, Scott, and if you hadn't told me it was 2% sugar, I never would have guessed. I think you got the tannin from the Petite and the Syrah just right.
Yeah.
So it pretty much comes off as a dry wine.
Yeah, well, as winemakers, we're always looking to create that balanced, complete experience.
Yeah, well, you sure did.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, I look forward to the backside of this COVID-19 thing where we can smoke up the rest of these cigars. And as Molly said, we've got, we should do an event because we've got 5 or 6 vintages is sitting in barrel. And what would be fun is to have all the vintages in bulk. We'll just line up the barrels. You just taste the barrels and smoke the cigars, and Brian will figure out what's going to work best food wise, and we'll have a good time.
And then we'll make sure everybody has a safe ride to get home, because after that, I can tell you, having done a port tasting in college for one of my classes, where they just kind of let us drink the ports that all the local winemakers were making, that everybody was giggly
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
on our way home,
It's a little stronger than normal wine.
little
Been a
bit.
designated driver.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
Uber isn't too good in Amador County.
No, I think there's one. I think we've got one ride share up here, and that's it. We'll figure it out though. We'll make it fun.
Cool.
Well, thanks everybody. Sure great to see you guys all.
Cheers.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Leave the meeting, come down to the bottom.
Leave meeting.
Thank you all.
Everybody's.
Here we are.
Cheers.
You got a snow background.
Or is that really snow?